Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Glad to see you here for this debate review. It's one of the first of the Word War debates that I'm going to be reviewing. I'll be reviewing several of them. I have another one tonight at 7:30. I'm going to be doing Cool Vic versus Kung Fu Joe's debate. Very good debate, moderated by Ryan Mullally, my buddy Natural Law. A couple things to start off with. First of all, I want to just know throughout this that I know Chase McPherson as Vigilante TV or Vigi. So if I call him Vig during this thing, it's no disrespect. That's just how I know him. I'll refer to Octavius as Octavius, which is good to go because that's his name or his screen name or close enough. The other thing I want to I'm not trying to hide the ball at all. With the title on the thumbnail. When I say that Not So Erudite committed the Cardinal sin of the moderators, you'll see it in the moderator cross-examination. And the issue I have with that is a moderator should generally never put their own position into a debate or ask a question that's unrelated to what either of the parties in the debate has brought up. So we'll go over that when we get there. But my issue with the moderation, so I'm not hiding the ball. And it's not like, oh, she said there instead of they are. My point is that she asks questions in the debate that are not clarificatory to either person's position and that are arguments that she's trying to make to the debate from the moderator's perspective. And so that's what I mean by that. But we'll get there when we get there. The other thing, just for note, is that we're going to be going at 1.25 times speed. I've listened to it. I think it's slow enough that everybody can hear it, and fast enough we'll get through it in less than the hour and 9 minutes that it is scheduled for. So without that, let's go to opening statements. Octavius begins us, and we'll analyze this. Oh, the other point, too, is I'm trying to analyze these debates not by necessarily who I think was right or wrong, because the voting for this has ended, so I'm not trying to influence anybody's vote. I'm going to try to break down the arguments and the debate tactics and talk about maybe how either of these arguments could have been made better or more clear so that anybody who's watching this and is interested in the online debate sphere, the online debate community, can maybe learn a little bit of something and hone their own arguments or see what other people are doing and discuss them. At the end of this, but she actually kind of did though, right? You're not wrong, Vig. So we'll kind of open this from the start and kind of give some comments as we go. At the end, I'm going to drop a link in the chat to the StreamYard. So if anybody wants to come in and chat about anything, they're welcome. Well, anything related to this topic, more or less, they're welcome to do so. All right. Without further ado, let's get going.
Hate speech is free speech. The First Amendment was created to protect us against all forms of speech, aside from threats, of course. And hate speech is a term that's really a social construct. It doesn't really exist. A lot of things that are considered hate speech are not even inherently hateful. If you were to say, I hate cars, is that hate speech? Or does it only apply to people? And then if you say something like, I think a certain race are not that good at driving, is that hateful? I don't think so. A little rude, perhaps, but hateful, I don't think so. And it really comes down to who determines what hate speech is. And the answer is the potential legislators that would try to define that, to push any anti-hate speech laws on the public. And what gives those people the right to decide what hate speech is? It would really come down to their personal preference and whatever foreign entities they may be associated with. And they would have the full control to move the goalpost at will to constantly tweak and determine what hate speech is considered. And this would be a clear infringement on our First Amendment rights. And it would create a dystopian society where we are unable to really speak our minds about anything. Because the more laws that are passed, none are removed to balance it out. Laws are only added on. So if we started adding hate speech laws, they would only pile up, thus limiting all Americans' ability to speak freely and creating a society where we're essentially all just walking around holding our tongues in fear of imprisonment.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that, Octavia.
All right. So real quick, just analysis on that. Just as a debate strategy, right? He begins with a lot of what I would call fringe examples or soft examples. For example, is it bad to say I hate pizza or I don't like Chevrolet trucks? Or is it bad to say that, and he won't even go so far as to say it, is like maybe Asians are bad drivers is what he's trying to posit there, right? But then to go from that point of view of these very fringe, soft, not actually what any law is ever about, to, and if these things happen, we'll have a dystopian society, is a very far leap. If you're going to argue the cause and effect of dystopian society, it's much more effective to A, talk about what the laws actually have done, like say in Britain, and say we don't want to import that into America as far as American law goes with hate speech laws, and also start off by giving a definition of hate speech. Like the affirmative here never even gives a definition of hate speech. And he leaves it to, well, the legislators will get to decide what that is later on, and it might lead to dystopia. I mean, the legislator's job is to decide what laws are. So the biggest point about the argument is if you have a topic that's if you're a debater and you have a topic that's very fraught, like has a lot of dicey things like the N-word or racial slurs or whatever, like don't use those in the debate. That discredits your side. But don't make up like lesser examples like, oh, I hate Chevrolet trucks, or oh, I hate pizza, or oh, certain drivers of certain races might be bad drivers as examples of hate speech. Use the ones that are actually on the books. Use the ones that are the biggest issues. Use cases like Carmelo Anthony, or use cases like Chad the Builder, or Chuck the Builder, whatever that one guy is. Like cases like that are actually right. Yeah. And we'll get to that. Yeah, we'll get to that, Vigi. Yes. And this is why I think Vigi's very legally grounded response really hit hard in this. I mean, spoiler alert, because Vigi grounded his stuff in the laws and actual stuff that's going on, and not this hypothetical, really soft and nice thing, because that really doesn't have much moral grounding, because nobody in the world would say that I hate pizza is hate speech. So we'll hear Vigi's opening argument. We'll go from there.
Chase, you have 5 minutes.
Yeah, so hate speech is a complex topic. If or how we should and could punish it is an even more complex topic. So when we talk about this, we need a specific grounding to have a productive conversation. The definition of hate speech I'm going to be using is the UN's any kind of communication in speech, writing, or behavior that attacks or uses pejorative or discriminatory language with reference to a person, a group, or a group on the basis of who they are. In other words, based on their religion, ethnicity, nationality, race, color, descent, gender, or other identity factors. The main thing we need to focus on is how this can be applied to law, and the law requires intent. Criminal liability requires culpable mental state. This distinguishes degrees of the same act. Criminalizing hate speech on the basis of intent is legally orthodox. First-degree murder and manslaughter involve identical physical acts. The only intent separates them in criminal law. The hate crime enhancement statutes, like what was upheld in Wisconsin v. Mitchell, 9-0 vote in 1993, already punishes the same act more severely when the defendant selected the victim based on race, religion, or ethnicity. The court unanimously held that this does not violate the First Amendment because it punishes conduct motivated by discriminatory intent. Hate speech criminalization follows the same logic. It targets the intentional use of dehumanizing language to harass, threaten, or incite violence, not the mere expression of views. The First Amendment already has a built-in gateway. The doctrine does not say all speech is protected. It says speech is protected unless the speaker intends to incite violence and it's likely to work. A narrow criminalization standard requires 1, intent to harass, threaten, or incite violence, 2, targeting based on protected characteristics, and 3, a reasonable likelihood of harm. This mirrors the Brandenburg test from Brandenburg v. Ohio for incitement. Speech is only protected when directed to producing imminent lawless action and likely to do so. Extending this intent plus harm framework, the hate speech is a modest doctrinal step, not a categorical leap. Social consequences are imposed by private actors. Legal consequences are imposed by the state. The First Amendment restricts only the state. Social consequences are appropriate for the full spectrum of offensive, hateful, and dehumanizing speech. Legal consequences are appropriate when the 3 conditions I mentioned are met. Below that threshold, the consequences should be social. Above it, they should be legal. My opponent's going to say that criminal law punishes what you do, not what you think, that I'm using intent to make speech itself a criminal act, and it's thought policing. However, this is wrong. We already do similar with defamation laws. The defamation law criminalizes the publication of false statements made with malice through the knowledge of its falsity. The intent is what makes the publication actionable. The same words published without intent are protected. It's not thought policing. That's a legal standard using mental state to distinguish protected conduct from unprotected conduct. Hate speech criminalization follows an identical structure. The same words deployed with the intent to dehumanize and cause harm cross the line. Without intent, they don't. The focus here is how we apply this to law. When we apply it to the law, the grounding principle must be intent. The intent behind the actions is what makes the crime.
Okay, thank you, debaters, for both of your openings, and we will be right back.
Right. So before they go to their commercial, so I think that Vigi has a lot of good arguments here that got really super muddled, okay? I think it did. I think he dipped it in ecstasy before the round started. It helps get the mic sound and make sure it doesn't go mute. So I think the first kind of conflict of issues I would see in Vigi's opening is if you're going to talk, and Vigi did a great job. If Vigi's listening, you did a good job of grounding the argument in U.S. law, or at least trying to in a kind of like haphazard way. The issue is that to start with the UN definition of hate speech and then try to ground that in U.S. law when the U.S. has specifically, repeatedly, and overwhelmingly said, we're not doing with your UN definition or your International Criminal Court definitions of anything. I know the definition is very helpful to the argument because it's kind of all-encompassing and kind of puts your opponent off on the wrong foot. The problem is that when you start taking the UN definition and to apply it to U.S. law, that's already going to be a problem, right? So the next thing is we talk about the case. And so here's the legal framework that by the end of the debate, hopefully you can pick up that this is where Vigi was going. I kind of got it in a roundabout way. Is that Vigi's argument is in that 9-0 Supreme Court decision that allowed for hate crime elevation on federal crimes. So basically, if you committed a crime that's a federal crime and it was done for specific racial or sexual or religious animus, and that can be determined by a court at the sentencing phase, right? At that point in time, there's a hate crime enhancement to something that is already a crime. So that's ultimately what Vigi is going to argue here, is that if you fail the Brandenburg test and you're so limited only to those kinds of speech, which are incitement or fighting words. So only in those two very limited examples, if your incitement or fighting words had a specific racial animus going by the same Supreme Court test, only in those specific criminal cases, maybe then hate speech could have an enhancement the same way other hate crimes have an enhancement. That's going to be Vigi's ultimate argument here, but it's muddled in the beginning. If that could have come out clearly like that, that would help. The other thing that doesn't help in the opening as far as clarity goes is bringing up the Brandenburg standard and bringing up defamation cases, because again, defamation cases are purely civil causes of action. In America, in U.S. law, there is no criminal cause of it would go over worse than the UN definition because the UN definition is way more helpful to your side. And the thing is, your opponent never caught you on it or called you on it. So, it did well to win the round. I'm just saying, if we're trying to do a little bit of a debate prep coaching clinic here as much as I can, and you all are good debaters too. So I'm not trying to presume I know. I'm just saying to structure the argument more properly, you would want to use a U.S. definition of hate speech or something from a U.S. law journal, even if it's not part of U.S. law, then import the UN's definition, what the U.S. specifically rejects. The next thing is, it's a different argument, but it's a clever argument. In a certain way, it's a clever argument, because if you're saying, because if you were to get the affirmative to take the position and hold that hate speech is never a crime, then at that point in time, this little cutout would still be enough to technically win the debate. I think that was what Vigi was going for, and things never quite got there. Spoiler alert. But the other thing I wanted to say is just so on using, I think Vigi just slipped up and said that defamation laws criminalize certain kinds of speech if they're hurtful to others. They don't criminalize it. They allow a civil cause of action. So I think that was just a slip of the tongue. So yeah, well, yes, exactly. And that's why we don't want to import the UN and the UK's definition into the US, because it makes the US, it does not at all comport with the U.S. standards. I think Vigi was right to at least to cite some U.S. case law and say that, okay, hate crimes are a thing in the U.S. The Supreme Court has held there can be, and it's not, there's no such thing as a hate crime in the U.S. There is a crime that is already a crime that can have a statutory enhancement on the sentencing if it has particular animus and targets a person based upon an immutable characteristic, as Vigi described. But a hate crime in the U.S. is not a thing. It's a hate enhancement to an already existing federal crime. How you doing, brother? Good to see you. All right. So based on that, then, so that's where we kind of stand right now. Now we'll go into where it starts to become a hot mess. Well, I'll have to pause several. Well, we're going to skip the commercial, but after that.
After a quick word from our sponsor. Audience, it is now time to get into the meat and potatoes of today's debate. We are going to have 15 minutes of open debate where anyone can talk at any time, ask each other questions.
Right. I got you. That you're saying that you said it well, that if there are things that advance beyond, like people can handle things in work. If you say a bunch of racial slurs at work, you can get fired from work. There are civil consequences. If you defame somebody, you can have civil consequences, right? Yeah. I think you're right. It was just explained poorly, but I think eventually we get there. But yeah. Hey, Jared, how you doing, brother? All right. So this isn't actually where the moderating goes bad at first. This is the open part.
Clarify words and semantics and build out the bulk of your actual argument so the audience can decide who is the better debater. Okay. You guys have 15 minutes. Whoever would like to start, take it away.
I would like to respond equating hate speech to defamation. With defamation, there is a clear victim or someone feeling attacked.
Okay, so Thunder, Octavian here dropped the ball on that. Like, there is a clear definition, the distinction. One is criminal, one is civil. The victim distinction is the wrong avenue of attack there.
Personally, by whoever the defamer is. With hate speech, you're relying on the government to make that call. And I think that's
But still, you'd have a victim. So if the government was going to prosecute hate speech, you still have to have somebody going to the cops and complaining they were hate spoken against, and the cops be the ones prosecuting it. So the victim distinction is not logically valid here, right? The distinction here is right, but the thing about that's missing, but that's close, is that in order to get past the First Amendment bar in the United States, the bar to prosecution of the First Amendment, it would have to fall into first either the incitement to violence. I don't think intent to harass even falls into that, bitch. I think it would have to be incitement to violence or fighting words, and those have their own. Each of those crimes or those abilities to get past the free speech bar, the First Amendment bar, has to have several elements met. Is the incitement to violence imminent? Is it likely to cause harm? So I think you're getting on the right framework there, but you'd have to first pass the bar to the First Amendment and then go into this analysis. Oh, you'll see. But I think Octavia has kind of the right idea that there is something that we can all detect that's fundamentally distinct from. Well, right, but what constitutes harassments in each state is different. Like online harassment might be the closest you'll get, and I think 12 states have things have statutes about that. Well, defamation is not a crime, right? No, right, you're right. Defamation is not a crime, and the only way to show, and so the thing that, and the interesting thing too. Okay, so not to go too far in the weeds here is, so, oh hey, Dark Side, how you doing? I didn't see you slide in. I was talking to the other folks here. Is so the reason why there is defamation and there is defamation per se. So defamation per se, you don't have to prove intent or the state of mind of the person doing the defaming, because it's something so egregious it would automatically constitute harm to them. And the best examples of that exist are: you publicly accuse them of having a readily transmittable sexual disease, STD, or you accuse them of an open and nefarious crime, SAing a child, murder, SA, right? Those are the kinds of things that can get you past the defamation per se line. Other than that, the mental state and the reckless disregard for the truth are part of the elements you have to prove to get a defamation claim past the motion to dismiss. And that's the lowest bar. before you file your claim, motion to dismiss happens. 99% of defamation claims get thrown out at the motion to dismiss stage because it's so hard to prove the mental state of the person. So I think if we're talking about this, right, we're talking about the First Amendment bar is the first thing you have to get past. The only exceptions I think we're talking about here are fighting words or are incitement to violence. Okay, that's fine. So let's analyze those then. So in order to deal with an incitement to violence loophole to the First Amendment, you have to make sure that the incitement of violence was contemporary with the actual threat of the violence. It was likely to cause actual violence, and it was imminent in nature, meaning that I can't say on Thursday, let's go beat the crap out of Jimmy. And that's not incitement to violence. If I have a mob of people who are ready and the threat is imminent, if I'm like, there's Jimmy's house, and we're like burning crosses and have torches on his house, on his front lawn, and I'm like, get him now, guys, that's incitement to violence. That passes that bar. And if Jimmy therefore happens to, under Vigi's analysis, I think here, if Vigi happens to be a person of a different race, and I'm like, get that N-word instead of you can get Jimmy, then that I think is what Vigi's talking about, would pass not only the First Amendment protected loophole, but also then get to, yeah, you're not wrong, would also get to the hate speech enhancement. I think that he's trying to, no, you're fine. You're fine. You're fine, Rufus. You're fine. And I'm happy to go into that. But let's get through some of their arguments because I think some interesting stuff comes up later on, and Vigi ends up clarifying a bit, and it gets more solid later on. But keep popping. I'll try to keep going with the analysis.
Pretty big distinction.
No, I mean, there is definitely the ability to do this with hate speech. I mean, when you directly call somebody a slur, I mean, there is a direct victim in that case.
You can already sue someone for anything. That's part of what America being a free country is, unfortunately. But it's already in existence. You can sue anyone for saying anything, really. But it's what.
Yeah, but it won't pass the motion to dismiss stage, and no lawyer will take it. So, like, what? I don't think so. We'll get to that in the second group. I think Vigi's arguing for something more than that, and there is a legal basis for it. We will get to that, though. It can also cause harm to reputation. You don't have to show, depending on the type of defamation, you don't have to show actual loss of income. You can show harm to other ways. For example, if somebody lies about you and says you have an STD and your partner divorces you because of it, that's a harm that's not monetary. That can be shown, and that defamation can be held up in court. How much money that's worth as far as the damage side and the verdict depends, but that's an example of when it can happen without loss of income.
Yeah, and that's what defamation law is. The whole point of why I use defamation law was not equating hate speech to defamation. It was showing how we already handle, in a way, speech on a legal scale.
Well, do you think it's hate speech to say I hate Mexican food?
Okay, but you're welcome, Darkside. The difference here, though, right, is, and Vigi doesn't quite hit it here, or Octavian doesn't hit it here, is the First Amendment only protects you from the government. The government shall make no laws abridging freedom of speech. So, and that's where the criminal involvement from the state comes in, okay? So we do handle words said meanly among people if they are harmful to income or to reputation through civil defamation laws. The real bright line here is that the state steps in, and the First Amendment particularly and really only protects people from actions of the state to limit their free speech. Like if you go say a bunch of racial slurs to my wife, I can go punch you in the mouth, right? And I'm limiting your freedom of speech in a sense, and I'll get charged with let me know, Jared. Let me know.
No,
that's
not directed at the person.
I hate Mexican people.
Again, just from a debate strategy, going to the soft strategy, right? Of like, is I saying I hate Mexican food, hate speech, like that has what to do with the price of whiskey in Ireland?
It can be.
Do you think it's hate speech to say Asians are bad drivers?
It's using racial stereotyping, but it's not necessarily hate speech.
So I'm still not even sure what your definition of hate speech is. Can you provide an example?
Yeah. So it would be things like what the KKK does, where they're like actively using different types of speech, including the use of slurs, to dehumanize minority groups, mostly Black people. When we look back in history.
So it sounds like you're talking about the N-word.
Not just that. I mean, there's the whole. I mean, we can use some more modern examples, like when Trump sat there and called Mexicans as a whole rapists. That would
really, Vigi, really. I don't think it helps your case, bud.
be a modern example of the president of the United States utilizing hate speech.
Okay, well, according to the
But Vigi, under your own definition, though, right? At that point in time, that would have, in order to be your definition of hate, your proprietary, very tailored definition of hate speech, that would have had to cause incitement to violence, which under the Brandenburg Standard would have to make an imminent and ultimate threat from an actionable person in that time frame against that group. So I don't think that example even meets your own definition. I know it's on the fly. It's a debate. It's a question. I'm not trying to say you're very good at this. I'm just trying to say, like, I don't think that quite meets your own definition that you gave in the beginning.
DL and APAC, hate speech is considered historical data and using facts to support global regimes. And
so now we're using APAC's definition of hate speech. Again, like, clarifying stuff in the beginning is very helpful. Like, if Octavius is going to use APAC's definition of hate speech, not wrong, birds aren't even real. Not wrong. But if Octavius is going to use APAC's definition of hate speech, if he's going to adopt that, then use that as at the beginning and say this is the problem, right? There was a lack of clarification. I mean, Vigi gave a definition of hate speech. It was the UN's definition, which didn't match the legal arguments he was making at the beginning. But again, like, it's weird in the back and forth to start like bringing definitions in all of a sudden, right?
And those are the same people. While you may personally disagree with ADL's definition, those are the same organizations behind the Trump administration and responsible for a lot of involvement in legislature. So are you trusting the ADL and APAC to control the definition of hate speech?
Again, that really doesn't have anything to do with, like, this is okay, so let's talk about, there are several different kinds of debates we can have in the sphere. We can have policy debates, like whether or not this policy is going to do good or bad things. And that kind of debate and argument, like, well, if we're going to have a policy about what hate speech is, should APAC be the one controlling what that is? Or should the Islamic Brotherhood be the one controlling what that is? Or should the Southern Poverty Law Center be the one controlling that is? Or should the Aryan Nation be the one controlling what that definition is, right? At that point in time, we talk about the level of pragmatic implementation of a policy. This argument lands. If you're talking about should hate speech be protected by the First Amendment, then whose definition of it doesn't really matter. We're talking, it's a moral argument. It's saying in any world, as an abstract concept, should hate speech be protected by the First Amendment in the U.S.? And so legal arguments are good, philosophical arguments are good, moral arguments are good, saying, well, what if this guy gets the control of the hate speech? Wouldn't that have a bad outcome? It doesn't really land with what the topic is going for.
No, I mean, we have a pretty clear legal definition on like what hate speech is. So the definition that I was specifically using was the one from the UN, which is very similar.
And that's good, Vig. If you give a definition and he doesn't until you're into crossfire or whatever, that's fine. You have all the right to go back to your definition because he didn't proffer one first. That's proper.
To the definition that we use in American law when we talk about the.
But the definition of the UN is not the one we use in American law. So,
hate speech or hate crime enhancement statutes, which is what that is, by the way, is when you utilize hate speech in the commission of a crime, it enhances it to a hate crime.
But that's also not that's not strictly true either, is it though, bitch? What's strictly true is if you commit a federal felony and it can be proved that you did the felony for reasons that are hateful towards somebody's immutable characteristic, and maybe as you were stabbing the person, you called them the N-word, or burning a cross in the lawn, you called them the N-word. Maybe the speech is part of the evidence to get them there, but the speech alone doesn't make it an enhancement.
The definition from the UN is any kind of communication in speech, writing, or behavior that attacks, uses a pejorative or slur, or discriminatory language in reference to a person or group on the basis of who they are. In other words, it's based on their religion, their ethnicity, nationality, race, color, descent, gender, or other identity factors.
So if you physically assault someone for being fat and ugly, that is, while calling them a fat ass, that is not hate speech.
Because it's not immutable. Like weight is, even if you have a genetic condition or were born that way or whatever, like the definition doesn't quite. No, I know. I'm just saying, like, it'd be good to give that definition as opposed to because he's Octavius here is batting around like he doesn't quite know what he's even getting at yet. And he's giving very soft, like not softball hypotheticals, but hypotheticals that are so unrelated to the actual topic, they're almost laughable. Like if you beat a fat person and call him fat ass, well, it's not immutable, and it has nothing to do with any of what the laws were ever written. I suppose so. I suppose whether you go to heaven or hell is an immutable characteristic. So even saying you're going to hell is a hate crime at that point. I'm just joking. I mean, in the UK it sure can. In the UN it sure can.
Because that is not currently a protected characteristic. No.
Oh, hey, Kung Fu Joe. Hey, I'm only doing reviews of ones where the voting is closed. I've already voted on all of them. So I've only like I don't want my analysis to influence anybody's vote because I think that would be a disservice to the folks who are debating. So I'm only restreaming ones that are already closed. So. But I will encourage everyone to look for the new ones to drop. I'll link them when they do drop. And then when they do drop, your vote in America might count for once. So look forward to that.
Okay, so that seems ridiculous to me because I would say if you are yelling.
I don't know if you saw Kung Fu. I'm doing yours tonight, actually, man. At 7:30 Eastern time.
Any sort of pejorative at someone, followed by an assault, especially, regardless of race, gender, or ethnicity, that is hate, and it's minimizing it's minimizing actual hate between people because a hate crime really, if you go and beat the shit out of someone, you hate them. And you're gonna get a lesser sentence.
Okay, again, and Vigi was right at the beginning to bring this up. Is the intent of the crime, whether it's malice? So malice and malice aforethought are different than hate. Again, hate is a very specific legal definition, and maybe Vigi should have pushed back a little harder at this point, is that hate has to do with you committed the crime specifically because you had intent to hurt somebody of that racial enemy. It's not okay. So let's say I go to the bar tonight and I get in a fight with a black guy, right? And he punches me and I punch him and I get charged with assault and he gets charged with assault. The fact that he's black does not mean that's a hate crime because I didn't have any specific animus to him. It was a mutual altercation, right? The notion of intent, the mens rea is the legal word of the hate crime, is that it was committed for the specific reason that you hated a person of that group, not that particular person. Like if I hated a guy named Jeremy and Jeremy happened to be black because Jeremy was putting dog poop on my doorstep and I was like shooting pellet guns at his cat, right? That's not a hate crime and that would never be prosecutable under U.S. hate crime statutes. But again, U.S. hate crime statutes are only if you have an existing federal, not state, federal felony. And the hate crime is an enhancement to it if it was deemed that the reason you committed that crime was because of animus towards that group.
Because they're the same race as you. I don't think that makes sense.
Yeah, so the specific hate crime enhancement law that I'm referencing here
There you go. So
is
you got it right, Vijay. I knew you circled back and got it right. Yep.
California one. There's multiple across the country. The California one is just the one that I chose to use. So the protected characteristic,
because it's most helpful for your. Somebody cue up that Chappelle meme.
within the California one is race or ethnicity, national origin, religion, sexual orientation, gender or gender identity, disability, and association with individuals who have any of the above characteristics.
Which means California adopted the UN's definition. Almost whole hog. So that's California, not federal law. And there's never been a Supreme Court case to uphold California's definition about that. And that's also hate crime, not hate speech statute.
Am I mishearing you, or did you not include religion?
I included religion, yes.
Okay.
Religion is included as a protected characteristic.
I guess religion is not technically immutable, so I retract that bit, but it's lumped in the group with all the statutes.
Okay. So, well, we really have to bring up anti-Semitism laws then, because that's really the major threat of hate speech. Because
Is it really? I don't think you want to go down this road, Octavian. I really don't.
it's become considered hateful to suggest involvement in 9/11, JFK assassination, USS Liberty. I could go on for a while with this, but merely speaking of this, if
just like, go on as long as you want. Where are you going?
anti-Semitism laws were enacted, I could be personally held liable for hate speech for referencing this. When I have said nothing hateful, I have merely suggested connection, which is backed by substantial evidence.
Yeah, this is so what you're referencing is how the government briefly in 2017 to 2021 changed the legal definition of anti-Semitism to include criticizing Israel, which is a great example of why
I wouldn't have taken it there. I don't think it helps. I think it just muddles things. But okay, we're going to Israel now.
need to allow to have the government exclusively be the one creating these definitions, not allow foreign influence in our legal process whatsoever, not just in the creation of laws, because this has also created anti-BDS laws where we can't even boycott companies because of, or we can't boycott Israel because our government wants to criminalize it. Now, when we talk about anti-Semitism, criticizing Israel is not anti-Semitic. When
they would disagree
we talk about what is, I don't care.
They who? Who do you mean they?
If Israel disagrees with that, it's the fucking truth. The point of what racism is and what anti-Semitism is when you're being discriminatory against somebody who is either of the Jewish religion or the Jewish ethnicity. That is anti-Semitism, and criticizing Israel is not. Israel is a country.
Israel is a country made up primarily of one specific religion, and they themselves personally conjoin the two. So who do you think?
This is where it gets funneled. They themselves personally conjoin the two. Like, I'm not a big pronoun person in general, but the pronoun slippage here is causing a loss of consciousness.
Is going to be making these hate speech laws.
So currently, the way
do you think Israel would be involved in creating these hate speech laws?
I mean, the majority of hate speech enhancement laws, the ones that I'm talking about, are.
See, now you got it right again. See, that's the thing is I knew from the beginning it was just muddled from the start. Hate speech what you mean is hate crime enhancement laws, and you're arguing that there should be a hate speech enhancement for breaking the Brandenburg Principle and having a action or a speech act that's not protected by the First Amendment. I think that's the small box of argument that Vijay's been making this whole time. It's starting to come out. Like I told y'all, it would come out later in more full form. The wording's not quite right yet, but you're getting there.
Are already in effect. A lot of states have them.
And it becomes the Jews debate really quickly, actually, here.
I am unfamiliar with anyone being held criminally liable aside from a lawsuit.
Those are two different things. Criminally liable aside from a law, that's the lawsuit, civil, criminal, state charges. Different things.
Well, when I'm talking about hate
And
speech
even
enhancement
then,
laws, I'm
it's
talking
been
about
defamation on attack on personal character, and I've never heard of anyone being sued successfully for their demographic being attacked.
yes, because what a hate speech enhancement law is not just criminalizing the speech itself, but it's criminalizing the actions in conjunction with the speech, the same way that we already do with calls for violence. If you're calling,
Again, the language is slippery here, right? It's more slippery here. It's not the same thing as we do for calls for violence. We're not going to criminalize I think if I understand you correctly, Vidge, we're not going to criminalize it the same way we criminalize calls for violence. We're saying if there is a call for violence and part of it is hate speech against the group, that could have the same sentence enhancement that a hate crime would have for that particular loophole through the First Amendment. Hit me in the chat and make sure I'm getting you right, because I think I am. I'm trying to understand your argument the best I can. Okay, but not the same way that, so a hate speech does not equate to a call for violence one-on-one automatically. It's not like if you said hate speech, it's a call for violence. You're saying if there was already a predetermined call for violence, all those three elements were met, then if it was hate speech was used in that call for violence, that could get a sentence enhancement. Yeah? It's okay. I forgive you. The chat will catch you up.
for the violence against a minority group, you're committing a hate crime.
Well, I agree that calling for violence and threats should not be considered hate speech. It should not be protected. I think that threats are a separate thing. I don't think we're talking about that. But
Vigi is talking about that specifically, is when there is a threat, then if it was made using what his UN definition of hate speech is, then that threat could be have an enhanced sentence because of that.
I mean, it is tangential here because a big portion of what is hate speech is calling for violence. Especially when we talk about the ability to criminalize hate speech, because when we are talking about the law requires intent. So when we talk about intent behind hate speech, the main factor on whether or not it should be criminal is calling for violence.
I'm going to bump it up a little bit more.
Action creating violence.
Well, again, back to the ADL and AIPAC's definition of anti-Semitism. Is it saying that Larry Silverstein, with ties to Israel, who happens to be Jewish, bought the World Trade Center under precarious circumstances? If you break it down, it was not a great investment until he got it insured and made $5.5 billion on the insurance payout and happened.
What does that have to do with literally anything?
Not to be there that day. Do you agree that happened?
I don't know too much about this. I think you talked about this a little bit when we were setting this up, and I have not had time to look into it.
Well, thank God. You would have been wasting your time if you did look into it.
Well,
so maybe we rerail a little bit back closer to the prompt specifically, which is whether or not the First Amendment should protect hate speech. So I think, Octavius, you would argue it should protect hate speech. Hate speech should be viewed as free speech. Do you maybe want to make arguments for why that's the case, or Chase maybe make arguments as to why the First Amendment should not be protecting hate speech, or maybe you.
Okay, so this was good moderation. This was good to bring it back about freaking Larry Finkelstein or whatever, right? But so this was good moderation. It doesn't go so well later on.
You guys can really iron out what hate speech is in this conversation.
My point of bringing up the 9/11 scenario was to give an example of something that would be considered hate speech. And I know you said
under no definition previously given would that be. So, okay.
You don't care what Israel thinks, but they have enough ties into our government and our legislature and our legal system that they could, if they became successful in garnering these hate speech laws, I could potentially be held criminally liable for saying that.
Yeah, this is why tangentially, when we're doing this kind of thing, we also need to be advocating for foreign governments to not actually have influence in our politics. Whether it's Israel, whether it's Saudi Arabia, whether it's any of the European countries, it doesn't matter. We shouldn't have foreign governments influencing our government.
Agreed, but they do. And that's like saying we shouldn't have guns. Sure, people wouldn't get shot without guns, but people have them, so we got to have them.
But again, like this is where it gets off the rails, and people need to circle back. And the moderator should have been doing a better job. So this is maybe my first overt criticism of the moderator, other than what I started off with, is this debate is about should. It's not an ought. Like the ought's not in there. The ought's implied. It's like should the First Amendment ought the First Amendment to cover free speech, whether or not freaking Santa Claus or the Grinch or freaking Tim Pool gets to decide what hate speech is, or whether or not Tim Pool is buying seats in the legislature or the Grinch is buying seats in the legislature, has no relevance as to whether or not a thing should or should not be covered. And so it's kind of like Octavia's running around and Vidya's trying to pin him down, but it's not like there's not enough nails being put in the feet yet to actually stick the guy down. Oh, Chipangro, that's a you problem, brother.
The whole reason behind why it happens is a completely different topic, but there are reasons as to why people get away with it, and it's mostly the lack of prosecution for actual crimes.
So what about using a racial
So what are we actually talking about?
slur that is not followed up by violence or does not include threats?
That would be followed up with social consequences. That's not something that we would be able to hold somebody criminally liable for because of the standard that we already have.
So you don't believe it?
All right, good. So that was Octavian asked a great question there, and Vigi started to dodge it, but then came back into it full core. Let me go back a little bit, like a couple seconds. That was very good. This was probably the best question asked and the best answer asked, even though Vigi tried to dodge. Like, okay, I'll take it.
Hold somebody criminally liable for because of the standard that we already have.
All right.
It's not some prosecution for actual crimes.
Okay. Here's a good question. Here it comes.
So what about using a racial slur that is not followed up by violence or does not include threats?
That would be followed up with social consequences. That's not something that we would be able to hold somebody criminally liable for because of the standard that we already have.
So you don't believe in hate speech laws? Because that is by definition hate speech, and you just said they should not be held criminally liable. By your definition, what hate speech is.
I made a separation during my opening statement on what we should.
It could have been a better separation, Vig, and we've talked about that before. It could have been a better separation.
We actually need to criminalize and what we don't need to criminalize, right? So what we need to criminalize is the criminalization standard that I used, again, was intent to harass.
1 minute left.
Yep. Intent to harass, threaten, or incite violence, targeting based on protected characteristics, and a reasonable likelihood of harm. If there is no likelihood of harm and then there's no harm that followed up, there is no point in criminalizing it. That is when social consequences come in.
All right. So I think that just to kind of crystallize what Vigi's argument is, and if anybody wants to make a similar argument in any debate going forward, here's how I would suggest doing it from the opening statement, is that the Brandenburg Standard allows Supreme Court decision. It's Wisconsin or Ohio or Iowa. The case is Brandenburg v. U.S. is there are certain types of speech that are not protected by the First Amendment. And again, the First Amendment only protects you from the government prosecuting you, not from other people suing you or punching you in the mouth or firing you. And so the Brandenburg Standard says fighting words and incitement to violence are things that are not protected by the First Amendment. And so what Vigi's argument is here is that so if you've committed a speech act that violates the Brandenburg Standard, so you already have basically thrown away your First Amendment protection, then if the nature of that speech act was motivated and they can prove it beyond a reasonable doubt that it was motivated by a racial animus, there should be a hate crime enhancement to that. Now, I think it's kind of hiding the ball a little bit on the fact that should hate speech be a crime or should First Amendment protect hate speech? So there's a difference between a sentence and a crime and an enhancement for it. But that's a bit down in the weeds. So if anybody wants to encapsulate Vigi's argument and run with it in the future or a version of it, it's there are only certain things that get through the First Amendment loophole. So presuming we get through the Brandenburg Standard and we have something that is not protected speech, so you don't have First Amendment protections, well, at that point in time, we can apply hate speech standards to it.
But who dictates what is the likelihood of harm? It is going to be the very people that don't want.
Well, and state governments too, actually, Chipingo. All governments. All governmental entities. The 14th incorporates the first of the states. So prior to the 14th Amendment, then only federal government. After the 14th Amendment, federal and state governments. But you're not wrong.
To be spoken about. And they will have the full liberty to move the goalpost.
Oh, it's absolutely a viable strategy. And it's one that he would, no, I think it's a freaking great strategy. Like if I was going to argue it, I would do if I had to argue your side of this prompt, Fidge, I would have done something similar. Not the exact thing, but I would have done something similar. It is a viable strategy. If you get saddled with the negative side of this prompt, it's definitely a viable strategy.
And I don't assume that you trust the government enough to handle that responsibility.
I mean, like I said, I'm utilizing laws that we already do this, where like with the hate speech enhancement law, and we also.
Well, you're advocating for a hate speech enhancement law, not saying it exists. But yeah,
we also have the concept of fighting words. We also have the concept of fighting words, right? So like when you're
the other
in an
Brandenburg
argument with
test,
somebody, and
the other thing that you can get via the Brandenburg standard, the other thing that you can get past the First Amendment on fighting words and incitement to violence,
or like yelling slurs at them, and then they hit you, you're the one culpable because you started the fight. There are plenty of examples throughout the law on like how this.
Well, if you start yelling the N-word at somebody, they come fight you, you might lose your right to self-defense. That doesn't make that a hate crime by itself.
Kind of stuff already happens.
Okay, time is up, everyone. We're going to pause right there super quickly. We are going to get moving into basically the moderated structure Q&A section. This is where we're going to get to the bottom of definitions, to the core of our argument, so that we really have a good structure to build off of for the final open fire section that will follow this. So before I get you guys to submit me questions, I have a couple questions for each of you. I feel like what will be really valuable in this conversation is for us to agree on a definition of what we mean when we say hate speech. So Chase, I know you submitted a definition. Can you read it again, just really concisely? And then Octavius, tell me if you think that that's a good definition or if you have something else.
Yeah, so the one that I used was the UN definition. It's any communication in speech, writing, or behavior that attacks, uses pejorative or discriminatory language, I'll just shorten it, based on somebody's religion, their ethnicity, nationality, race, color, descent, or other identity factors.
Sure.
Okay, Octavius, do you feel like, I know that you want free speech to be free, but do you agree that we can label these things as hate speech just for the purpose of this conversation, or do you reject that definition?
I reject that definition. I don't think hate speech.
I mean, the way that question's worded, like, so here's the first misstep the mod did. The mod gave him a binary. She said, do you accept his definition? Like, i.e., are you like agreeing with it whole hog, or do you reject it? So at this point in time, Octavian's backed into a corner by the moderator, saying that I either have to reject or accept this definition. That's not the question you should have asked. Be like, how would you like to respond to his definition? Would be the proper moderator or a proper moderator question.
Is a real thing. If it was going to be, I would say my definition of hate speech is saying that you hate anything. I hate cold spaghetti. I think that's hate speech. And I don't think
that's even more stupid than the UN's definition, but whatever.
There's anything wrong.
Because I think that the same thing too is I think at some point in time, you're not wrong. Is like at the point, and this is where we'll see it as it goes further, right? Is like this pattern continues, and it's not a good look for a mod.
With it.
So essentially you're saying hate speech doesn't exist.
So, okay, here's where it goes off the rails. He was put into a corner now where he had to either accept Vigi's definition or reject it outright. And he's like, I reject that definition because I have the only other option was to accept the UN definition, which has no applicability to US law. I'm not sure he thought that far ahead, but that's what he had to do. So he obviously and instinctually says, I reject that definition. And then she's like, well, what is your, so now she's making him give a definition. So it's now she has 3 questions on him so far. So what is your definition? He's like, well, anything that causes hate. I hate cold spaghetti. Stupid definition, but whatever, right? And now she's going to go a step further.
Essentially.
Okay, gotcha. And
let me go back again.
I think that's hate speech.
Okay.
I think that's hate speech. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it.
Now she presses him again.
So essentially you're saying hate speech doesn't exist.
So now she asked him, so essentially you're saying hate speech doesn't exist. That is probably the worst question a moderator could have asked. Nobody has claimed that. Vigi hasn't claimed that. Octavian hasn't claimed that. All Octavian has to argue here is saying that the First Amendment protects hate speech. So after he was forced to either choose Vigi's definition or make or reject it, and then make one of his own off the fly, and then comes back. So essentially you're saying that hate speech doesn't exist. Yeah, yeah. But the thing is, it's really effed up to make that mistake as a moderator and then push it on one of the competitors. So it gets worse real quick.
Essentially.
Okay, gotcha. And Chase, I really want to iron this out very quickly. When you said
it comes back, wait for that. So she just asked him. So essentially, you're saying hate speech doesn't exist. He's like, well, I guess essentially, sure, because he has no idea what she's going for. But she comes back at him on this.
That the First Amendment shouldn't protect shouldn't protect hate speech.
Hang on, real quick.
Are you saying that?
Viren is, well, the whole point is, that's true. Right. If it doesn't, that's the thing that the mod does too. The mod is like negating the prompt. If it doesn't exist, then what the hell are we debating here? If hate speech doesn't exist, then is the debate actually about the existence of hate speech? In which case, like it goes off the rails when a mod starts poking into this and backing an opponent or one of the contenders into a corner based upon a personal line of questioning and a personal position that she's taken hundreds of times before, which is, I mean, nobody has to import that in here, but it gets bad.
Communication that attacks or uses pejoratives should be criminalized, penalized in some way. What if you don't want it protected by First Amendment? Obviously, you want some sort of litigation towards it. Would that be correct?
To an extent. So, I mean,
again, as a moderator, you're supposed to be clear. She just made a whole case. If you don't want this and this and this, well, how about some kind of litigation? She's giving Vigi a issue, like she's setting up an argument for Vigi that Vigi's never made, and then asking Vigi to agree or disagree with her argument as a moderator.
Part of it could be social consequences, including like suing somebody, but the part where like I'm talking about actual criminalization requires intent. So things like
that
direct calls for violence,
every day.
Utilizing it to harass somebody. It depends on intent. Like if you're just like on Twitter saying slurs, that's not necessarily that. While that is hate speech, it's not hate speech that we can really criminalize because there's not really any intent behind it.
Okay,
if your
so
intent is to cause violence, that's where the problem becomes.
Okay, so it's incitement of violence, but so I just want to make sure I'm understanding your perspective. So you are arguing that the First Amendment should not protect hate speech, but the hate speech that
yes. That is literally the side of the prompt he is arguing, is that the First Amendment should not protect hate speech. What are we doing?
You think shouldn't be protected is specifically hate speech that incites violence. Is that correct? Whereas pejoratives, which is what you labeled as hate speech, you don't actually think should be protected, or what's your stance on that?
So, I mean, for social consequences, no. Consequences like
no.
Getting sued.
No, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. She just tried to pin you in a corner too, but you were able to get out of it. This poor dude over here, and not poor dude, like he's holding his own, but he's never had a moderator come at him with her own positions and put him into a corner like that. Like, yeah, she tried to pin you too, but you were able to get out of it because you're like, that's not what I said. Yeah, no, you're right, Vidge. You're right.
Dude, no. I mean, when it comes down to crimes, there has to be some sort of intent behind it.
That's the cardinal sin.
Can you try to answer that more concisely? Do you want your definition of hate speech to be criminalized or litigated against?
He's already said like 6 times. Was she even listening to? I really doubt she was even listening to the debate half the way through, like half of it, because Vigi's already said the enhancement thing. He's clarified his position. So now she's going back to like square one, like she didn't even read the prompt or hear the openings or the arguments, and is just arguing her pet position against Vidge.
Or only incitements of violence? Like, what do you want criminally litigated against?
He doesn't want that either. He wants an enhancement to acts that incite violence and violate the Brandenburg standard. Like, we've been through this. That's what he wants. Whether it's too niche of a position or it's a trick or whatever, that's what he wants. That's what Vigi's arguing for. None of the stuff you're saying, Erudite.
What do you want the First Amendment to not protect?
Yeah, so I'll use the standard that I used in my opening statement. The intent to harass, threaten, or incite violence, targeting based off protected characteristics and a reasonable likelihood of harm. So
I think the way to clarify that too in the future, Vidge, or anybody else who's listening, is if someone is convicted on one of those crimes, incitement of violence or fighting words, the hate speech is only an enhancement if it was found to be a motivating principle. It's not a separate crime and not individually indictable. I think that's a legal distinction to make going forward.
If it doesn't meet that threshold, I don't think that it should be criminalized.
Okay, and so by that logic, okay, gotcha. Actually, I'm not going to ask the next question because that's probably better for Octavius to ask you. Octavius, to clarify your position a little.
This is what like got my dander up.
Bit more. You think that the First Amendment should protect hate speech, essentially. You're dubious that hate speech exists, but particularly it should be protected. What's your reasons for wanting to? So how do you want the First Amendment to protect something that doesn't exist?
That was nothing that he ever said. She forced him into conceding because he had no idea what was going on. Sorry, I'm getting a bit heated. Let me take a breath. She asked him a yes or no question. So essentially you're saying that hate speech doesn't exist. Yeah, I guess so. And now she's saying, well, how are you going to protect something that doesn't exist? This is terrible moderation. Not only are you straw manning an opponent, you forced him into a corner. You made him either accept the opponent's definition or make one up himself. He said, I don't accept the definition. He made one up himself. You criticized him on that. And you got him to say, so basically what you're saying is hate speech doesn't exist. He's like, yeah, I guess so. I guess essentially no. And now she says, how do you want to defend something that doesn't defend against something that doesn't exist? It's horrid.
According to like your argument.
Well,
Right?
how do I want it to protect something that doesn't exist? Well,
We said hate speech doesn't exist. But if
No, he never said that. He never said that. You got, by the force of your questioning on him to a corner, he said, well, I suppose under what you're asking me, it essentially doesn't exist. And now she's grilling on the point that she made on her argument that Vigi never brought up because it wasn't part of the debate about his non-existent position.
there's a definition of hate
speech,
speech you want to use,
speech
we can do that.
exists. Hate speech is speech, and speech exists. So I think the First Amendment should protect speech.
That was a good answer, but Jesus, he should never have been had to answer that.
Okay.
And if you want
and
to
then how
call
do
it
you,
hate speech, then that is also speech.
okay. So then Chase suggests that at least incitements to violence should be criminalized. Do you agree or disagree with that?
I agree that
Oh yeah, that would have been way over the line too. Because, but that's literally your argument, though. Your argument is that because and again, I think Vich, at the beginning, if you'd have separated out, so like we're not talking about hate speech as a standalone crime. We're talking about hate speech. We're talking about speech that violates the Brandenburg Principle, incitement or fighting words, right? And after that, there could be a hate speech enhancement. So in this little narrow way, you win the resolution, you win the debate, right? So I don't think she even listened to your argument or properly understood it if she was going to ask you that, because that is the basis for your argument, but worded very poorly. Lord Almighty.
direct threats are not covered by free speech, but I disagree that a lot of so-called hate speech that is considered inciting violence potentially is not. You know,
Okay,
like the
so it
examples
seems
I was using before, like certain countries have connections to global
Right.
tragedies. A lot of people
Because that's like what a moderator does, is to clarify, not start debating both debaters and confusing the whole damn thing. Especially like, and this is like the big, let me clarify. When I say like in the headline, the cardinal sin of moderators, I mean, arguing against the debaters is bad. But giving a false binary to one debater and then using his answer of that false binary to create another false binary and then leaving him alone for a second and coming back and being like, well, how can you defend a thing that doesn't exist? Which was the answer to the second false binary you set up in a chain. Like, that's as low as it. I mean, I suppose you could start calling him racial slurs, that'd be lower, but like, that's about as poor a job moderating as I've seen in my life.
in that community would say that could incite violence. Even though I made no mention of inciting violence, there are plenty of people online that support the Zionist agenda that would consider what I'm
Or hand smacking. I don't even know. It seems like the only one that, and here's the thing too, is like, and I don't know her heart. I don't know her intent. I don't know whatever, but like, it seems like a lot of this debate, especially in this part, became her trying to prove that she's smarter than either of these debaters. And if you have any idea that you're like somehow going to ask such an intelligent question that you can prove you're smarter than either debater, or like if you were the one debating, you could win both sides or against either of them, then you should not be moderating anything. You should not be moderating a kindergarten fight over who gets the crayon.
saying dangerous and potentially promoting violence. And
Gotcha.
I
Okay,
don't
so then-
agree with that.
Okay, so then maybe a good question for Chase, because it seems like we're narrowing in on the really key areas of disagreement here between you and Chase specifically. The question that I would offer to you, Chase, is, especially because it seems like you're not very pro-Israel, so let's move Israel aside. Say a number of
What does it matter whether or not he's pro-Israel or not? I know she can't. It's like a compulsion. It is. But like, but the thing to do is, if you're at, could you moderate a debate for us, please? Be like, no, I'm not cut out for it. Just like some people recuse themselves from being judges or say, I'm nominated for a judgeship. No, that's not in my temperament.
people started talking very negatively, criticizing let's pick a random country, Norway. And
I mean, you did, but why does Norway or Israel matter? Like, this is entirely against. Like, I understand that you did make it clear that you're not a lover of the Jewish state of Israel, and you're not a pro-Zionist. That's fine. I don't think your opponent is either. The hell does that have to do with anything?
And they were insisting that Norway was paying into our country and all these things, all the things that essentially are accused of being said about Israel. Is that to you something that should be protected by the First Amendment to say? Where do you draw the line between essentially hate speech that is nasty and you don't like it, but isn't criminalized versus stuff that you think should be criminalized? Where does the incitement point begin? And where does perhaps stochastic terrorism fall into this? Because I think what...
Again, stochastic terrorism, which is a... Oh my God. No one in this debate mentioned effing stochastic terrorism. Stochastic terrorism is an idea that's been around for the last couple years. It was brought up. Oh, yeah, she's going in. It's like, well, what about stochastic terrorism? What about it? Nobody mentioned it. Stochastic terrorism is the idea if you put enough hatred out there, if you like the Jews, the white Christians, the white Christians, long enough, hypothetically, because of the law of averages and probabilities, somebody at some point in time in the future might make a terrorist act against one of those groups because you put so much hate out into the ether, including Twitter, including it was brought up during COVID about anti-vaxxers and about mask mandates. That's when stochastic terrorism became a thing. And stochastic terrorism means that if enough people, random blips on the board, put up enough hateful thing about a group, some point at some time in the future, someday, somebody is going to do something bad against that person. So first of all, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Second of all, nobody mentioned it. Third of all, it wouldn't qualify under anyone here's definition of hate speech. But it's a little pet phrase that she knows. She knows what it means, or she thinks she knows what it means. I've seen her debate other times. And I don't think she actually knows what it means. I just told you what it actually means. But again, stochastic terrorism, as it's called, would not violate the Brandenburg Standard, so it's not what Vigi's talking about, and it would definitely be protected under free speech, so it's not what Octavian's talking about. So why are you talking about it?
This is talking about is essentially what gets labeled as stochastic terrorism.
No, it's not essentially what anybody's talking about. My God.
Yeah, so I think one of the big differences here is like when we're talking about criticizing a country versus criticizing people based off of protected characteristics.
Thank you for bringing it back, Vigi. Thank you for being like, nobody cares about your stupid stochastics. Thank you, Vigi. I appreciate you trying to bring it back and not just be like, the Erudite show. It's the Erudite show. It's time for Erudite. She's not so erudite. The Erudite show.
I don't necessarily think that speech directed at criticizing a country should be protected in general. It's when we're talking about individuals and like groups of people based off of religion and things like that. So like making comments based off of like if somebody is Jewish or if they're part of the LGBTQ community, things like that.
But by your UN definition, that includes their descendants, their ethnicity, and that is directly tied into what country they're from.
But the whole point here, right, is like now because of Erudite's moderation, we've gotten into trying to define, well, we have the UN definition of hate speech. And now we're, for some weird ass reason, trying to define what different groups of people we can shoehorn into the UN's definition of hate speech. Even though that's not part of the debate. The debate is no matter what you consider hate speech, does the First Amendment protect it or not? And so a large portion of this debate gets derailed into, is it ethnicity? Is it race? What if you have a race that isn't ethnicity? What if you have a thing that's a race, an ethnicity, and a nationality? None of that matters to the prompt. And they were taken here by the moderator. They did not go here on their lonesome.
Yeah, that's tied to what country they're from. There's a difference between tying it into the country that they're from and criticizing the country itself.
But would you agree that where countries where an ethno-state is dominant, the line between these two criticisms is going to be blurry, right? Accusing Japan.
Why does that matter for the debate? The line between ethnos, it doesn't matter. It's your pet project, Erudite. Why are you making them debate your prompt?
Japanese people of something and Japan of something gets blurry because it's such a dominant ethno-state. Same with Israel to Jewish people, which I think is what Octavius is pointing to. That there's not a super clear line sometimes between pointing to concerns about Jewish people versus pointing to concerns about Israel.
Yeah, I mean the line is a little thin, especially when we talk about like Israel, because of the ethno state. The distinguishing factors would be, in my opinion.
I don't speak Gem Alpha. What does that mean? Can somebody translate for me?
At least would be criticizing the country itself and not just like saying that like in his 9/11 example, like saying that it was caused by Jewish people. Saying it's caused by Israel is completely different than saying it was caused by Jewish people.
Okay. Octavius, does that satisfy kind of the delineation that you're looking for from Chase? You might not agree with it, but do you at least understand what he's trying to delineate here?
No.
I could conceptualize his separation. However, I don't think Israel is controlling the government is different than Israelis are controlling the government.
Okay. So the question then to Chase from Octavius is, there's not much difference between saying Israelis control the government.
It's not the question from Chase to Octavius. It's your interpretation of what you think Chase is saying. Question. That's not. It's your question. The hell.
And Israel controls the government, or Norwegians control the government, and Norway controls the government. That seems like kind of the same thing.
So now you're taking a position too. Oh, here's the question, but let me actually ask you a different question. My God.
It can be.
Okay. I'm tracking now. I understand. Yeah, absolutely.
Specifically, the difference is
you did.
that
You did
when you're saying
job.
Israel controls the government.
You did a great job of like short of being like, lady, we're trying to have a debate here. Do you mind? You did everything you could.
You're saying that the Israeli government controls our government, not that the Israeli people control the government. Yes, the Israeli government are Israelis, but there's a difference between saying the people are controlling or influencing our government versus saying that their government is controlling our government.
Okay. Chase, do you have any questions for Octavius that you would like to kind of
Moderator, do you even care what the fuck he just said? I don't think you do.
Iron out his position, who says hate speech speech is just speech. It should all be protected by the First Amendment.
Hey, I'm glad you have. Blue Aquitator. I don't think I've seen you before. Thank you for coming in. Make all the comments you like. I think that helps the algorithm like us more, maybe. Just keep going. It's a fun time.
Leave it alone.
Yeah, do you
right?
I mean, do you agree these
best,
protected categories actually already exist in law, like things like ethnicity, gender identity, things like that?
Good question.
Yes.
Boom. Way to circle back. Good job.
Okay, so do you understand that, like, when we're talking about hate speech, we're talking about discrimination based off of protected categories?
Yes, and I think that's stupid.
Oh. Blue Aqua Tiger. Okay, there we go. I wasn't sure if it was like Blue Agitator. Sorry. I was trying to do too much of it. No, Blue sounds like a great guy. I'm glad he's here. Stay around, Blue. You've been awesome. Sorry I mispronounced your name. My bad.
I think having protected categories is stupid if we're trying to promote equality.
Well, I mean, the whole reason for having protected categories is to prevent discrimination, because a lot of the protected categories are historically discriminated against. The whole reason why America was founded in the first place is because of religious discrimination in the UK back during the English Empire.
Well, if you look behind pretty much every discrimination law, every sort of equality movement, it is all led back to predominantly people from that certain religion. Which is my main concern about all of this is that they are going to maintain the power and the control and be able to move the goalpost at will and criminalize you for saying things that eventually do not match your definition, because they would say blaming Israel and Israelis are the same thing.
But what does that matter? Okay, the whole point here is it doesn't matter like who says what. If that is hate speech, say that blaming Israel for everything is hate speech, blaming Jews for everything is hate speech, then they're the same thing. Does the First Amendment protect that or not? That's the question. And we've gotten so far off the freaking rails because of our moderator. We're talking about what...
Chase, do you have a follow-up question to this, or do you feel like you've gotten an answer to your question? I think your question, Chase, was, do you agree that discrimination exists?
No, that was not his question at all.
Just full stop. Is that a good simplification of your question, Chase, as a starter?
Yeah, that's kind of where I was pushing it.
Well, could you answer that question, actually? Do you believe and agree with the reality that discrimination exists?
He already admitted that, and that was not the question.
I believe discrimination exists. I think it is a sign of intelligence. I think if you are able to tell discrimination essentially is telling the difference between things, which is a measure of IQ. If you are able...
Is that what you...
Like if the topic was, is it the Jews' fault for X, Y, Z, and or everything, that's relevant. It's not relevant to the debate whether or not he blames the Jews or not. Is his blaming the Jews or anybody else blaming the Jews protected by free speech? Well, that's good. That's
What do
good.
you mean by discrimination?
But you should ask it, not her on your behalf.
Chase, when you say discrimination, are you talking about people's ability to tell the difference between people, or are you talking about something more specific?
I'm talking about like societal discrimination. A great example of this would be like the Jim Crow laws, things like that.
Okay. So when you mean discrimination, could you maybe concisely clarify what you mean, which is not just to tell the difference between things?
The use of the difference to oppress specific people. An example of that being what I just mentioned.
That is true. So Octavia was good to catch her in that. I'm like, I think too. I mean, if I was him, I would not have been put in this position. I don't think. But being in his position, and he realizes that she's been turning the screws on him by making him. She's been putting words in Octavian's mouth for so long that he's just going to give a funky definition of discrimination because she asked him that. I think if Vigi had actually asked the question, he would have given Vigi a good faith definition. But since she's putting words in his mouth this whole time and telling what he says, I think he's irritated enough at this point, though he's not showing it, which is a good job on his part, that he's just like, to tell the difference between things, because F you.
The Jim Crow laws, how it was used to oppress Black people during the 60s because of their differences.
So do you agree then, Octavius, the question is, do you agree that that type of discrimination exists?
Can we say, does racial discrimination exist? Wouldn't that have been a good question for somebody to ask? Moses.
Where people of different races or religions get treated differently as a result of their race, religion, gender, etc.
I think discrimination of all sorts exists. I discriminate against fat people, whether they're the same race as me or not. I discriminate against people who are missing teeth. And it's not race dependent.
Hey,
if someone is a different race
how
and
rude.
They're really good looking, they're not going to be discriminated against as if they're
So to clarify,
more, about attractiveness, honestly, when it comes to.
So to clarify, yeah, Chase, do you mean discriminate? Does discriminate to you, Chase, mean being mean to someone?
And what she does in moderations as well, apparently, which is like the worst thing you could do as a moderator, aka the cardinal sin.
Not necessarily. It more so means to actively oppress somebody because of immutable characteristics. Like an example of a more common example, modern day, would be like declining somebody a job because of an immutable characteristic.
You still get Vig. You still get it. Yeah, you still did good, Vig. Don't worry about it.
Characteristics like their race or their gender identity, things that are technically illegal, but we still mostly believe does happen.
Well, can you define immutable characteristics? You give me a few examples, but I don't think that quite covers it.
Oh, man. Why? Erudite put him on this because of this definition of discrimination thing. Again, like, I think the biggest thing here, or not the biggest thing, but one of the biggest things is Erudite's line of questioning has put Octavian so far on the defensive that he's just trying to dig himself out of a hole to figure out what the hell we're talking about anymore. When Vigi's definition of discrimination and hate speech under the UN Charter already did that. So we're going to be retreading old ground, but Erudite made him have to do this.
It's a little vague.
An immutable characteristic is something like your gender, your race,
and that's the answer
or your sexual orientation.
That's
so
it.
would we be fair to say immutable characteristics are things you're born with?
Yes, that is what an immutable.
Does that work for you, Octavius, as a definition?
Except religion. Yes, we cover that. Go.
Just for the sake of this conversation.
What if you're born with a cleft palate? That's an immutable characteristic then.
Yes, that would be an immutable characteristic. A disability would also be an immutable characteristic. I should have included that.
Okay, so just because I want to, we are almost out of time for this section. I want to make sure we both are agreeing to this definition. It sounds like, Octavius, you agree. Things you're born with are immutable characteristics,
Yeah, sure.
at least for the sake of this conversation.
Sure, yeah.
Okay, awesome. So we're basically going to take this.
Why is the moderator saying, for the sake of this conversation, will you accept? That's a debater word. A moderator should never be saying, for the sake of this conversation, will you accept this other guy's definition? Jeez Louise.
Just right where you ended, Octavius, put a pin in it. We have 15 more minutes. So Octavius, I'm going to give the floor to you because I think you were going somewhere with this pushing on immutable
I'm going to pot you down, Octavius.
characteristics specifically. So you guys have 15 minutes of open conversation again. Take it away. And Octavius, I'll throw the baton to you first.
Well, I'd like to bring up an example that I think is pretty relevant here. Chud the Builder. He's been going around screaming the N-word at Black people and inciting violence, or at least attempting to. I think this guy is an asshole, and I think he deserved to get his ass kicked. However, I don't think that it should be illegal. Again, I do think he should get his ass kicked. I think he needs to face social consequences. He ended up shooting himself and getting prison time, so it kind of took care of himself. You go around long enough being an asshole, you're going to get what's coming to you. Now, if he were to have said what he said into his phone, for example, and just posted videos, I think that's different because now he's not targeting specific people. He's talking to his channel, his subscribers, whatever. If you want to click on his video, that's your prerogative. The moment you go out into public and scream at people face to face, that makes you an asshole. Now you can be racist and you can be hateful without being an asshole. You can say things that would be deemed hate speech in Chase's definition
Okay, good.
without personally
That's good. Limit the argument to his definition. We're getting good here now.
attacking people. I think personally attacking people is rude, disrespectful, uncalled for, and legal.
Yeah. So are you? I think the main distinction with the in-person thing, right? Are you familiar with the concept of fighting laws or fighting words in U.S. law?
I was unfamiliar that U.S. law has fighting words. I thought that was more of a
so
street
it
agreement.
was.
No, it does. That's under the Brandenburg Standard. He'll get it.
No, it's so it's a category of unprotected speech that their utterance is intended to incite violence or breach the peace. That is what is considered fighting words. So, like if you like in your example,
Again, even if you're doing it in a positive way on smart things, in smart ways, without gotchas, that's still not your job as a freaking moderator.
that you said shouldn't be criminalized, but he's still an asshole going around saying shit and trying to incite violence and basically trying to get his ass kicked, right? That would fall into the concept of fighting words. And in what I'm using, the whole intent.
I mean, not quite. Oh my God. Cowbell is into the chat. More cowbell. Or blue. Yeah. I mean, you know what I meant. So fighting words have a specific definition too, right? Fighting words aren't just like going around to say stuff that might start a fight. It's like, hey, bro, you want to fight me? Let's go right now. Let's go right now. Punch me first. Those are fighting words. Like when under the Brandenburg Standard, each of these things, both the incitement to violence and fighting words, have very specific legal definitions. So it's getting a bit fast and loose again, and that's when shit gets rough in debates. So fighting words aren't just like saying something that might make somebody want to fight you. That's not fighting words.
Thing, right? If he's going around yelling slurs at somebody and yelling slurs at a specific group, trying to do that,
Right.
We would do.
Oh no, I got it. So I was just trying to say, like, even if she was doing all the things that you were saying in the best faith possible, that would still be completely a horrible job modding. Yes, but presupposing her positions, injecting them into the debaters, and making them take contrary positions to the positions they took, or clarify what her positions are, or what she would like them to take as binary, is not.
In that case, it would be a hate crime enhancement. So he's not just going around using the fighting words; he's actively going out trying to incite violence against a minority, which
they could fight you, they could punch you, and then they would be guilty of battery and or assault on you.
Also makes it a hate crime.
I think if you do that against anyone, it should receive consequences. I don't think there should be an enhancement because it is directed at a protected class.
Yeah. So I mean, when
now we're finally circled back to the actual prompt. Should there be the way that Vigi defined the prompt? We're now actually debating it finally. Should there be an enhancement if you broke the Brandenburg Standard for incitement or fighting words on a protected class? This should have been the core of the debate from the beginning, under what Vigi defined it to be, which is fine. He can do that.
Frankly, I think protected classes is insulting to protected classes. It's saying that there's
doesn't matter for the debate, but okay.
So victimized that they need to be protected.
Not necessarily, because when we talk about like protections based off of race, you do realize that whenever it comes down to the Supreme Court and like our legislation based off of like laws getting taken to the Supreme Court, it benefits white people more than it benefits black people.
That legal analysis, the divergent impact isn't relevant here, Vig. A protected class is a protected class regardless of divergent impact. That's the Supreme Court standard.
Minorities in general, right?
What do you mean?
So, hold on. I'm looking for notes from an old debate because this is something I talked about before.
You're saying protected classes benefits white people more than black people? How does that make sense?
DEI benefits statistically more white women than it does minorities. I think that's what Vigi's going for. If Vigi's still in the chat, I think that's what you meant.
So when we're talking about race specifically, right? When it actually gets taken to the Supreme Court. So this is from a civil rights debate that I had. A study by Albany Law School found that under Justice Roberts specifically from 2005 to 2014, found that 7 cases claiming discrimination against white people. There were 7 cases claiming discrimination against white people, and all 7 were found in the favor of the claimants. And there were 11.
So what you were saying is that white people can also be discriminated against. Okay. Okay.
cases brought by minorities, and only 5 of those cases were decided in favor of the minority group. So like when we look at the application of like civil rights laws and protected group laws and such in the law, it benefits white people more often than it benefits minorities.
So that argument you just made, Vigi, is a divergent impact argument. You're saying that it benefits one group over the other. There's a divergent impact of that, right? So like I know you maybe didn't start there, but you ended up getting to a divergent impact analysis.
I don't understand. I thought white people are not a protected class. How could they be the victim of a hate speech crime?
So the protected classes are race or ethnicity, national origin, religion, sexual orientation, gender identity, disability, or association with those groups.
Okay,
so when we talk about race being a protected class, you can't discriminate against somebody because they're black or Mexican or whatever. But even with white people being the majority, you still can't discriminate against white people either.
Okay, but they are not a protected class.
It is a race, so it is a protected class. It is still a protected class.
Okay.
And that's why when we actually analyze the cases taken all the way up to the Supreme Court and look at it, it's actually more likely for a discrimination lawsuit that makes it to the Supreme Court to be decided in favor of a white person who's bringing it than a minority person who's bringing it.
Do you have an example of a hate speech case where the white person was the defendant?
It would have been, but you get the prompt you get in these, I think. But yeah, you're right. Hey, Vig, if you're out, Vig, drop me a link in the Discord for your, because I think our mod, I don't think we have any mods on stage right now. So drop me a link to your channel in the Discord. I think you should get a link here.
I'm talking about discrimination specifically, not necessarily hate speech.
Do you have an example of discrimination against white people?
So there's the whole Disney thing, right? You remember the Elon Disney lawsuit?
No. Okay,
so there's a lawsuit. I think it got settled or Elon dropped it. But there was a leak from a Disney VP where the VP was talking about how they were directly told like, oh, they're not going to hire white people.
I don't think this case proves what you cool. I'll wait for it there. I don't think this case is going to show what you want it to show, Vig. I'm familiar with this case.
And because of this leak, Elon ended up bringing a lawsuit against Disney because they were directly stating that they were not going to hire people based off of their race, and that is
they were because of DEI policies. They were specifically trying to solve past injustices by refusing to hire white people across the board. Yes, and promote as well.
Discrimination.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Yeah.
You agree? So now you understand that discriminations can also happen against white people as well, even in the United States where we are the majority?
Yeah. I thought you were arguing discrimination only applied to minorities. But again, like I said before, I think
but that's not, again, like the whole issue here is that case doesn't prove what I think you think it proves. That case was to the point that, well, the thing is, like, again, oh, good point. If I only knew how to do that. I can only, from my side right now, because I'm not on YouTube, I'm only on StreamYard, I can only delete his comment, put Vigi in timeout, or ban him and delete their comments. I can't mod him from here, and I don't have my YouTube window open. I'm only running StreamYard because I'm kind of doing all the things at once. So, sorry I'm a Luddite. I'm working on it. Right. Okay, so give me your link tree real quick. I can only do so many things at once. Moses. Jesus, Darwin.
Discrimination applies to everyone regardless of race. So discrimination against white people, that's the same to me as discrimination against minorities. It's the same to me as discrimination against fat people.
Yeah, no, I'm arguing about discrimination against protected characteristics, most of which being immutable
Not for most of history.
Characteristics, but also like your religious group.
I know how to open up new windows and tabs, Darwin. I'm aware of how to do that. I'm just juggling other things. Vigi got me. We're good. I don't mind modding you. Yeah, I got you, Vig. I don't mind modding you, Vig. I just can't do it from my StreamYard tab.
As well. Because most of the protected classes are immutable characteristics, the only exception being religion.
So then, if you conceived a child and that child had immutable characteristics that were going to cause it to have a very unhealthy life, perhaps breathing through a tube and not having limbs, and you decided to terminate the pregnancy, that by definition is hate speech that incites violence. Because
what? If you had a child who had a genetic condition that made it not have limbs and breathe through tubes, that would be hate speech. Yowza.
Essentially killing a baby because it has immutable characteristics. Are you against that?
That has nothing to do with speech of any kind.
That would be a completely different scenario. That's not even remotely tangential to hate speech.
Exactly. Thank you, Vidge.
The difference in that scenario is the fact that you are trying to prevent a child that would borderline barely be living from having to suffer through its pain.
So
let's maybe rerail a little bit then back to the actual prompt, which is the First Amendment should protect hate speech. So we talked a bit about discrimination, hate speech, incitement of violence. Let's maybe make because you got 5 minutes left. So let's kind of wrap up towards what do you feel like you need to know from your opponent to convince them to your side, whether you think that the First Amendment should protect hate speech or whether it shouldn't protect hate speech.
Well, you can sue anyone for anything. I could sue you right now for emotional damages because you disagreed with me and that made me sad. But you still have the freedom of speech to say it. So the fact that I can file a lawsuit against you is not entirely relevant to the fact that the First Amendment exists. It's more relevant to the fact that America is a free country in the sense that you can sue anyone for anything.
Well, no, because like when we talk about like speech-based lawsuits, right? That's an example of social consequences coming in and affecting how you use your speech. So like a great example of this would be like Alex Jones with the Sandy Hook with the Sandy Hook parents, right? How he lost InfoWars because of the misinformation that he was expressing on the Sandy Hook situation. Does that make sense?
But that did not incite
the social consequence.
And losing a company is not a social consequence. That was a legal consequence.
The social consequence is he was spreading the misinformation and pissed off the parents, so they brought the lawsuit, and he lost the lawsuit
in a legal court, which is not
social. Where
which has nothing
consequence. That is a legal consequence.
So when we're talking about like suing somebody, so specifically for like what they sued him for, which was my brain just died for a second.
Don't make me put you in timeout, Darwin. Don't make me put you in timeout.
For defamation, right? Because they were arguing that he was defaming the character and saying of the parent saying that their kids didn't die. The defamation of character, defamation in general, is one of the places where the social consequences and the legal consequences become a little bit blurry. It's not.
Well, they don't become blurry in the case of the First Amendment, right? Though the whole issue here is under the First Amendment analysis. The government cannot go after you for a speech act you make unless it violates 2 prongs or 2 different kinds of the Brandenburg standard, right? Either incitement to violence or fighting words. So in defamation, it really doesn't get blurry because the state is not taking any action against you. And if there's a thing that says that, oh, if you sue somebody for defamation in a civil action in a state court, that's the state taking action against you. No, that's not. It's a private party with a private cause of action suing you privately. It has nothing to do with the state taking action. There is no First Amendment protection from anybody being sued from defamation. The First Amendment only bars the government, be it state or federal, after the incorporation of the 14th Amendment of all the states. The First Amendment protects you from the government going after you for speech.
Criminal to do it, but you can be held civilly liable.
Right. Which is not criminal.
You understand the difference between criminal law and civil law, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's a difference between criminalizing something and holding somebody civilly liable for something. So when we talk about like defamation law and how that can be utilized with hate speech, we're talking about how the
thing too, and I wasn't going to get into this, it doesn't ever like come up, is like all the Supreme Court statute or all the Supreme Court cases that govern defamation is no. So, okay. So Vidge, let's take it back 1 second. Okay. So your definition is the UN definition of hate speech, which is any kind of any kind of like slur or anything derogatory of a person or pejorative even based upon a person's immutable characteristics, including immutable characteristics plus religion plus sexuality. Okay. And we can debate whether or not sexuality is immutable or not, but all those things, right? The point in time is that calling somebody a slur, giving them a pejorative, using them using a racial category or characteristic to publicly call them that. The Supreme Court has held in every case that is not enough to constitute defamation. You can call somebody the N-word all day. They cannot sue you for defamation because of that. So I don't know if you knew the case law well enough, but the point is that merely using a slur or using what your definition of hate speech is never rises by itself to the level of defamation under the Supreme Court standard. So I think, not that anybody in the debate knows this, but if somebody did, it would undercut the argument at this point.
Intent can be used towards like content creators, for example, with the Alex Jones, in order to sue them for spreading discriminatory rhetoric. Whereas when we're talking about criminalizing,
well, it's not discriminatory rhetoric. Alex Jones accused people at Sandy Hook who died of being crisis actors. Okay? In that case, the families sued for emotional damage caused by Alex Jones's false statement. So it was intentional infliction of emotional distress was a cause of action that got ruled on in that. Defamation and defamation per se were also allowed, but the one that got the verdict was intentional infliction of emotional distress. Also, that case never reached the merits. The court issued summary judgment against Alex Jones at the preliminary stage. So it's correct to say that Alex Jones was found civilly liable for defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The $1 billion verdict came from the intentional infliction of emotional distress to the families, but that case never reached the merit, never reached the jury. The judge decided in a preliminary fashion that Jones was in default on providing discovery, and so ruled for all the plaintiffs in the class action against him without it ever going to anything past the basic motion to dismiss summary judgment stage, just so people get their facts straight on that. I'm not defending Alex Jones. I'm just saying we need to get our legal postures here correctly. For Darwin's point here, you can say the N-word, and you can say that word, and you can say whatever you want. You can say the most heinous things in the world that are racially based, sexually. You can say the F word, not fat, but the other F word, not flag, but the other F word. You can say all those all day long to anybody, to their face, online, or whatever. And those will never constitute a valid cause for defamation by themselves in America. Now, if I said this N-word has AIDS. AIDS is a sexually transmitted disease. That constitutes defamation per se under American law. But just saying this N-word X, Y, and Z, if it doesn't constitute either being a carrier of a sexually transmitted disease or a notorious and open crime, essaying somebody, theft, robbery, whatever, that then causes them damages to their possession, to their profession or personal life, you can call anybody anything, any slur all day, and that is not a cause for defamation. And there's a litany of Supreme Court cases that prove that. So that's where that stands.
Throwing somebody in jail, there has to be some sort of intent.
Okay, well, also, an absolute defense defamation is the truth. So if you say something that's a racial slur and involves a sexually transmitted disease, and it also happens to be true, you have an absolute defense to any defamation case brought against you. I'm not advocating anybody go do that, but any kind of defamation at any point in time, the truth of what you said that they think is defamatory and you can prove it is an absolute defense. The case stops there, game, set, match, and they're paying your attorney's fees to defend yourself.
So the intent to incite violence, like the person that you were talking about earlier, going around yelling slurs and trying to incite violence against a minority group or a racial group or a group based off of their immutable characteristics in general.
I think violence should be allowed in response to fighting words.
It literally is. If somebody utilizes fighting words against you and you hit them, they're the ones held liable because they incited the violence.
No, they're not. No, they're not.
I've never heard that.
Any of it.
Man, I know what I'm doing this
All right,
weekend.
you guys have 30 seconds.
No, they're not. Okay, so you're half wrong and half right, Vidge. So if someone uses fighting words, that's not protected. The government can prosecute them for instigating the fight. If they punch you, they're liable for assault and or battery, depending on what jurisdiction you're in and whether or not it's a criminal or civil case. So since it's not civil, it'll be assault and battery, right? You say fighting words to them, they punch you, right? That means that your fighting words aren't protected by the First Amendment. So say you say fighting words to them like, hey, N-word, come punch me right now. Let's fight. And they don't punch you. The government can prosecute you for assault, which is a threat made with words towards another that would put them in imminent fear of bodily harm. The fighting words exception is to be able to prosecute you for assault on that person, even though you were using your free speech. So the whole point in time when they actually fight you, the fighting words thing doesn't enter into it anymore. We're talking about actual assault charges. The fighting words workaround to the First Amendment under the Brandenburg Standard is you go up, hey, N-word, or hey, Joey, hey, Sam, come fight me, and they don't do it. The police can prosecute you for assault because you were using fighting words which placed them in imminent fear of bodily harm. That's the only thing the fighting word standard doesn't get around. It doesn't mean if you say fighting words and you get into a fight, all of a sudden there's no liability there. No, that's not what that does at all. So there's still an issue.
You guys have 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Anyone want to retouch on the prompt at all? Any last final questions to iron out
Does anyone want to touch on the prompt at all?
why the First Amendment should or should not protect hate speech?
Oh, she remembers the prompt. Hallelujah, Jafar.
Yeah. So do you think utilizing discrimination in any way, shape, or form in like a legal sense is okay? Especially against a group based on their immutable characteristics or their religion?
I mean, I think Asians should get priority to self-driving cars.
Okay. Unfortunately, that is where we have to wrap up today's.
That's actually pretty hilarious. Like, I'm glad you could tell he had that in his back pocket the entire debate.
Debate. So time is up, everyone. Well done. Thank you so much. Debaters, make sure you guys prepare yourself because when we come back from this ad break, we're going to.
I think she actually has one and talks about it frequently on streams, unfortunately. I'm not even joking.
Welcome back, everyone. The debaters have had a bit of time to prepare their closing statements, to iron out their last final definitions that they need to do. Which of you opened? Who had their opening statement first? Was it Octavius or I think it was Octavius, right?
It was Octavius. Yeah.
You're the moderator. You don't remember who had the opening statement? So dumb.
Okay, so since Octavius, you got the first word, Chase, you get the last word. So Octavius, you're going to start us with closing, and then Chase, you're going to finish it up for us. So Octavius.
She's married, but they're in a polycule, polyamorous, poly-open, yabba, yabba, yabba. Shoot your shot.
You have 5 minutes. Convince the audience of your position. Go ahead.
Hate speech is free speech. Hate speech, if it is real, which according to the UN has its definitions, which doesn't include hating people for their physical appearance, which is also a thing that they can't change, which I would say is equally discriminatory as race. I think it's even more offensive to a fat person if you call them fat than an Indian person
The level of offense doesn't matter. Make a good argument, bro.
for calling them Indian. Because there's nothing inherently wrong with being another race, but there is something wrong with being fat. And you may argue that's not an immutable characteristic.
No, dude, I appreciate you, man. No, and that's what this all is for. You didn't have somebody with like legal background like consulting you on this. You did a fucking good job. It's a fucking admirable debate, man. I'm just saying, like everything's better in 2020 hindsight. We have somebody who knows about the topic talking about it. No shade at you at all, man. No shade at all. I appreciate you.
Because you can lose weight, but some people can't. And that's unfortunate. But the main point is the deciders of what is hate speech is not.
That's not, I mean, maybe that changed, but that's not what I've heard. Not heard like around the grapevine, like heard her say openly on stream a bunch of times.
Not going to be the American people. The definition is going to be in the hands of our satanic pedophilic overlords that are going to do everything in their power to restrict our free speech, to make sure we cannot call out an unjust government, an unjust shadow government, and controlling us.
See, all of these. Hey, thank you. Hey, appreciate you, Darkside. Thanks for coming in. Thanks for hanging out. The whole thing is that most of his closing is response to these stupid Israel questions that got brought up that aren't part of the prompt. I feel like he kind of got goaded into this closing.
Into submission and making us imprisoned in our own homes with VR goggles connected to a robot fleshlight to keep us out of the streets and off the internet to share our opinions because they don't want us speaking the truth, because they don't want us showing what's really happening. And they want to censor us because they want to hide their plans for global enslavement.
Awesome.
Yet. And also the whole like 1 minute closer argument. Yeah. Anyways.
Thank you so much, Octavius. And Chase, you have the final word. 5 minutes.
Knock it out, Veggie. Take the ball.
So we talk about hate speech and we talk about applying it into law and like what actually should have consequences. I provided a narrow criminal criminalization standard, which mirrors what we already utilize here in the U.S. Intent to harass, threaten, or incite violence, targeting based off a protected characteristic and a reasonable likelihood of harm. When we talk about the protected characteristics, the ones that we actually protect in law are race and ethnicity, national origin, religion, sexual orientation, gender or gender identity, and disability. The reason we protect these things is because there is a history of discrimination on these characteristics, most of which are immutable characteristics. The only one that you can really change is your religion. But we protect religion specifically for a number of reasons. The history of discriminating against people for religion goes back a very long time. Whenever it comes to the United States, the whole reason why this country was founded.
Oh, hey, if anyone wants to hang around, I'm gonna when this is done, I'm gonna drop a StreamYard join. Actually, I'll drop it now. Actually, I'm gonna drop a invite guest link into the chat. So if anyone wants to come up and talk about anything, not for like forever, ever, because I got other stuff to do today before I go live again at 7:30, where we're doing Cool Dick and Kung Fu Joe's debate. Kung Fu Joe is already in the chat. I'm looking forward to that later on tonight with a moderator who did not have the foibles of this one. But if he wants to come up and talk briefly about anything at all, or about the debate, or about debate stuff in general, or questions about debate tactics, join as soon as Vigi finishes closing here. You're welcome on board.
Was because the Protestants that came over here and founded this country were being heavily discriminated against and killed by the English in the UK at the time. So they came here in order to escape that discrimination and that violence. The reason why we protect race is because of the fact that, well, of slavery, of the Jim Crow laws, and how the utilization of race can be used very effectively to silence people, whether they're a minority group like Black people or Mexicans, or whether or not they're white. We see this with hiring practices, like the Disney thing that I brought up, where Disney just straight up said that they weren't going to hire a white person for a role. This is just as fucked up as if somebody said that they weren't going to hire a Black person for.
But again, like I think we got distracted a bit. All right, hop on, Charles. The whole point is, again, like I think you got distracted a bit too by the whole circuitous nature. Like you're not nailing home your point. You're talking about all the other ways people can discriminate. We already agree. Apparently, we had some consent by the moderator and your opponent that discrimination can happen. So, like the point that can happen is, yeah, I know. No, I get it. I get it. And I think that's part of the moderator's fault is that both of you got put into defending Israel or not Israel or different interest groups, right? I think it distracted from your actual argument. That's why I think the moderator, the way the moderator handled it, made both of your jobs way harder. And even though you had your argument really well laid out by the middle of the debate, I think it, made a problem for you because I mean, if I was in your position, I have to deal with all these other extraneous arguments now that weren't actually part of the debate, but like now I'm trying to deal with them, and now I got to try to fit it into a freaking into a closing. So I get why you're doing this. I get it. I'm just saying, like, it should never have gotten to this point.
A role that is not, it's discriminating based off of somebody's race or any other immutable characteristic is not something that we should accept. And in fact, when we talk about things like the Disney situation, because they were directly trying to discriminate against people for the immutable characteristics, there were legal consequences because they ended up getting sued by Elon Musk. Now, how this applies to criminal law.
Okay, good job.
Is like the example that Octavius used, where somebody goes around yelling slurs and they get hit. They were going around utilizing fighting words. Another way that this can be used is like in California.
Again, I appreciate Vision in the chat agreeing that that's not the right analysis, so we'll let that pass. But I mean, for the purpose of the debate, it worked because nobody knew better.
You know, with the hate crime enhancement laws that I talked about a little bit.
There we go. There we go.
And
get back to it. Land the plane, Vig. Land the plane. I've already seen it, so I know you land the plane. I'm just kind of like, you
go into a business or you go up to somebody and rob them and you call them a slur and make it very clear that the reason you're robbing that person is because of who they are. That is a hate crime. That is why that gets enhanced into a hate crime. So when we talk about the law specifically, the law is based off of intent. That doesn't mean there can't be social consequences or even civil legal consequences when it comes down to non-intent based things like the Disney lawsuit. But when we actually talk about criminal consequences, there has to be intent. Otherwise, it is civil consequences that matter. And civil consequences.
We actually have the same exact mic. I just make mine do one solid red color. He could do that He can make whatever color he wants. It doesn't have to be like a like I don't know, like a hypnotizing lava lamp thing. Like he could make it just be one color, but it's a personal choice. I'm not gonna detract upon this microphone's immutable characteristics.
Are still saying
Or mutable
that your speech is
characteristics.
not protected. Otherwise, we wouldn't have defamation lawsuits.
Awesome. All right. Congratulations, debaters. That wraps up your official first-time performance.
All right. There we go, ladies and gents. The link's in the chat. Does someone want to hop on and hang out for a bit? Any questions or anything? If not, I would hope to see some, if not all, if not you all plus more back this evening. Hey, Grid. How you doing, brother? The link's in the chat. If anyone wants to hop on and talk about anything, any old little thing at all, or about the debate we just reviewed. I'm going to give it a couple minutes here, and if we don't get somebody to talk about something, I'm probably going to call it for this stream because I'm doing another one, like I said, 7:30 p.m. We're going to be going through Cool Vic and Kung Fu Joe's debate. The link's in the chat. I'll post it one more time just to make sure somebody didn't get distracted by the microphone and miss it. Well, everybody's bailing out, so I think we're going to go going once, going twice. So to the highest bidder in the stream. I'll see you all at 7:30. We'll be back again. I appreciate y'all for hanging out. You find me on Discord, find me on this channel, find me on my brother's podcast. This podcast will become your tomb if you like Sleep Token and lyrical analysis and mythic analysis and poetry deep dives. And my brother riffing on the guitar. It's a whole separate thing. All right. Take care, y'all. God bless. Talk to you soon.